All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Usually give it a few minutes for everybody to hop in right on time. But welcome to our June webinar. And thank you, everybody, for being here. Today, we have a very special guest, Kaylee Smith from Lincoln Financial. And she's going to be doing the presentation today. And you're very lucky to have her, not just because you need a break from listening to me all the time, but because this is really what she does. She specializes in, not to bury the lead, long-term care. And it's a big topic. Kaylee's going to do her best to really get into some of the many nooks and crannies, but really, I think starting before that, the basics. What is it? Why do you need it? Who needs it? And I'll let her dive into it. But we're so fortunate to have her today. I just wanted to introduce her. And please, as you would me or anyone else, ask questions, use the chat. There should be time for some questions at the end, but we'll have all our contact info up on the screen. If you have questions for Kaylee that don't make it into this, we can certainly forward them on. So without further ado, Kaylee, take it away, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anthony. So I
Yeah.
am going to share my screen. I'm just going to make sure that you can see that.
Looks good.
Yes,
Awesome.
I can see it. Looks
Okay,
good.
perfect. I love it. Well, thank you everyone so much, for taking the time out of your Wednesday to be here. I know that there are plenty of other things you probably have on your list to do this week, so it means a lot that you popped on to chat about long-term care. I know this probably wasn't like the most crazy exciting topic ever, but I'm very thankful that you're here. Before I roll into this, and I do have, let me click here. I do have, you can see Anthony on the screen here. I am very spoiled. I do get to work with him and Amy often in their team. So very lucky that I get to work with them and be their long-term care specialist on the team, if you want to call me that. But as he said before, any questions that come up throughout this, feel free to throw them in the chat. Feel free, you can save them for afterwards as well. I always say my main goal as I start rolling through some of the information here is just for you to leave with more information about long-term care than when you came into the meeting. So learning, even if that's one single thing or maybe it's 10 things for you, if you leave knowing more than when you came in, it's a successful day for me. You can see a very large photo of myself on the screen here, but I work with Lincoln Financial. I primarily cover, or I only cover Minnesota, North and South Dakota here for my territory, but I'm a regional marketing director. It's a fancy way of saying I'm just the long-term care go-to for those states for anyone who can wholesale our product or anyone who can sell our product. But again, any questions, feel free to throw them out. I really just want this to be as interactive as possible because I know as I'm going into some numbers, you'll see some figures on the screen. They can be intimidating. You have questions. Again, just feel free to throw those out there. But as I'm kind of going into this, today we're going to touch on why we plan for long-term care. I'm not sure if it lets you guys throw up like a little hand gesture or whatnot, like the little clapping emojis, if you want to call them that. But I'm sure many of you on this call have had an experience with long-term care, whether that's helping take care of a loved one, visiting a family member in a nursing home, assisted living facility, or maybe you did help yourself, or you yourself did help take care of a family member needing an extra set of hands for care. I'm sure we've all been there, and that's actually why I got in the field I am. When I was younger, my grandparents didn't have a long-term care plan in place, whether that was, a policy that we're going to talk about later, or what was going to happen to them when they needed care. So I actually watched my dad kind of end up being that default caregiver, which is why I do what I do now, getting to be an education person around it and actually sit here and chat with folks like you guys to help them learn a little bit more about care and getting some sort of plan in place and talking with your team about that. So, why we plan for those long-term care expenses, you can see here on the screen lots of different examples of things we plan for in life. I remember, getting my first job. I started my 401k in a Roth IRA, one of those plans that we set forth then that's going to benefit me in the future. Someday, when I hopefully have kids, my husband and I will set up a 529 plan for them. And you know this, maybe you have some for your kids, your grandkids, whatever those may be. We begin planning for those things well in advance. So why we talk about long-term care now is because it can help us prepare for the future if long-term care expenses are needed for you or your family members. So understanding the cost of care and another reason of why we plan for long-term care is because it is expensive. As you know, with anything, gas, groceries, everything nowadays, it's getting more and more expensive. And you can see on the screen, I'm not going to rattle off all of these numbers, but you can see that we do have to be mindful about the cost of care. Future long-term care is also going to be impactful as they're only expected to rise with all of these other items as well. So the cost for care today annually is just over 165,000. You can see that shown by the burgundy line here, right here. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. And then for 4 years, the total cost is just over 650,000. The reason we show these two figures today and then a 4 year cost or annual cost versus 4 years is because for women, the typical time of claim, we're sitting at about 3.6 years. So we rounded up to four. For men, we're showing just over 2 years. We're sitting at 2.2 years average length of care needed for men. So we show 4 years just so you can see how that would impact a plan versus 10 years from now, you can see costs are expected to be $233,000 a year or $934,000 for 4 years. And then skipping all the way to 30 years, because I know there's a lot of numbers on the screen and you can all read those here. We're taking a look at $464,000 a year with 4 years costing over $1.8 million. We do have to keep an approach that keeps pace with the cost of care we want to receive. And we want to make sure that you have options so we don't have to be reactive to what happens nowadays. We can be proactive and talk about these items now. But this is part of that reason why we plan for care. Unfortunately, it's only getting more expensive, and we want to make sure that we have those needs taken care of well before that we need to use any of them. Awesome. And then what is care? So we talked about why we plan for it, now talking about what it is. It's the ongoing help with daily activities. You can see these listed in that box here. I always say, I like to think of everything you do when you get out of bed in the morning for activities of daily living. So you transfer out of bed, you show continence on your way to the bathroom, you go to the bathroom, you shower, you get dressed, and then you eat breakfast. Those are our activities of daily living. Long-term care is the inability to do two of those activities of daily living for at least 90 days or severe cognitive impairment. I think when I think of severe, I think, hey, I can't leave grandma home alone because we're scared she's going to put the laundry in the oven and turn it on versus putting it in the dryer. So severe meaning could be a possible safety concern when leaving someone home by themselves. So can't be left home alone for a cognitive impairment or the 2 of 6 activities of daily living. A long-term care solution, so what we're going to talk about in a little bit, and the product that I actually cover here in Minnesota, it helps take the financial burden of healthcare costs away from your portfolio and you yourself and transfers this risk to an insurance company, folks like us here at Lincoln. So it also provides a range of services to support you and your family members if you need care, when you need care. We actually have money that would come to you every single month to be able to pay for a nursing home, an assisted living facility, or maybe even a nurse coming into your home. Many, many different options to help make sure that when you can't do two of these 6 activities of daily living or have severe cognitive impairment, again, you don't have to be reactive. You can have a plan in place and receive care anywhere you'd like and anywhere you like, which is sometimes the most important because I know when life is changing, we don't always want to go into a nursing home and uproot ourselves from our house. We have the ability to stay home as long as we possibly can and bring providers into our house as well. So Lincoln provides numerous options to be able to do that. And the reason why I like to think about planning now is that kind of what we talked about before. When we start a job, we start a 401k or a Roth IRA. We can plan long term and start saving for these events while we're still healthy. Awesome. So on the screen, you'll see 4 different buckets here. We have cash savings, an investment portfolio, health insurance, and Medicare or Medicaid. Many people consider self-funding their long-term care needs. Now that we understand how much it could possibly cost in 30 years and what it's projected to and what it costs annually now, sitting at just over 165,000, you can see that cash savings, if we just have money in a separate account, it might not keep my apologies, might not keep up with the inflation or rising cost of care. An investment portfolio, if we invest that money and we self-fund with it later on, might not be the most tax efficient solution as money's coming out, could be taxed on it. And also, we can't time the market. We aren't sure if, goodness, the market's going to go down and all of a sudden we need money for care. And then health insurance. Unfortunately, a lot of times health insurance does not cover long-term care expenses if you're in a nursing home or certain facility. And then Medicare and Medicaid, things that we're all familiar with at age 65 when we can go on Medicare. This coverage may not provide sufficient funds to use for care or let you pick the facility you're in. So it does lack personal choice there. And then I'm just going to apologize in advance. I haven't had my eyes on the chat. So if any questions pop up, like I said, feel free to interrupt and I can answer those. But all of these options you've certainly heard of before. And I'm going to go to the next page. So taking a look at cash, we just talked about how cash might not keep pace with inflation. So on average for 1 year, you can see here, cash underperformed by about 9%. Probably a mistake that most people can recover from. But if we hold it for 3 years, that number goes up to 30%, as you can see, which even on just $100,000 is that $30,000 in potential loss. So even if it's unlikely someone stays on the sideline for this long, doesn't invest that money, we can have an average underperformance of over 1,000%. So just taking a look at that, even though cash is safe, right? It feels safe right now. These numbers here on the screen just show the real risk that can come with stocks and not owning them. Awesome. And then one quick slide to touch on the impact of inflation. I know that we are all feeling this right now, myself included. Every time I do a grocery order, go to pick up groceries, it's no one's surprised that everything keeps going up and up and up, especially over the last year. So we all want to know the impacts of this and our holdings, right? You can see that the chart on the left shows the nominal and real return of cash, as well as their averages from 1980 to 2023, so a couple years ago. And then we can see headline inflation sitting at about 3.4%. The chart on the right shows the nominal and real return of cash, as well as the averages from 1980 to 2023, overlaid with that healthcare inflation. And you can see here it's sitting at 4.9%. So cash can be an appropriate part of any plan, as you all know, but holding on to too much of it can keep us from reaching our long-term care investment goals. And despite those returns of 4.2% that you can all see here, the purchasing power of cash increased on average less than 1% per year. So if we consider how high healthcare is getting, inflation with all of that, cash earmarked for future care, we can see the purchasing power decreased by 0.8% on average. And again, I know we all know this, and I beat it like a dead horse, but I always just say that unfortunately we're all feeling it in other areas of life. Sometimes we don't think of it when it comes to healthcare inflation. These numbers, I see them and I read them all day, every day, being in the long-term care space. But I'm sure it's no surprise to all of you that unfortunately healthcare inflation is going up and up as well. Awesome. So now popping into some options for care. What we're taking a look at here are 5 different options in ways people receive care, or ways people can pay for care. Taking a look at that right hand or that left hand side, goodness, we have Medicare. So again, that number we talked about before, over age 65, benefits for nursing home and home health are limited here. So when I think of Medicare, I think, hey, they might pay up to 90 days of it, but after that, we are truly left on our own when it comes to long-term care. But that is an option for care that we can see. Now, bopping into the Medicaid bucket, in a bucket that most of you may not fall into just because you're on here and you're working with great people like Anthony and Amy. It's a joint federal and state program that pays for healthcare services for those with low incomes or high medical bills in relation to their income. So again, this coverage may be insufficient to pay for long-term care down the road, or the type of care that you would prefer, being in a nicer facility as opposed to a state-paid facility. And then in that middle bucket, and again, I know I touched on this before, but the reason I got into long-term care and why I actually joined Lincoln is the family. Family ends up being an option for care for most individuals, whether you're just stepping in to help out while there isn't a nurse there, or you end up like my dad, who was that main caregiver for my grandparents because they did not have a plan of care in place. We have about 38 million, an estimated of 38 million people, and about 11.5 of the population are taking care of loved ones, whether that's mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa. I mean, I helped out a little bit when I was younger, but I was in high school, so my parents unfortunately took the brunt of that with them. And then falling into on the right-hand side now, the traditional long-term care insurance. Maybe some of you have these or you've heard of them back in the day. I like to think of this as use it or lose it. How it works, you pay in money to the insurance company, you use it for long-term care, you're taking the company to the bank. You are getting a lot of money from them to pay for your long-term care, whether you're in a nursing home or assisted living facility or any other options they offer. But the lose it part of it that I mentioned before comes if you pass away. The insurance company does not give money to your beneficiary, does not refund you the premiums you paid in if you didn't use it for care. The insurance company keeps it. And that's why I like to call it use it or lose it. If you don't use it for long-term care, your money is left and gone to the insurance company. These were big back in the day. Like I said, some of you on here may have policies like these. Some of you have probably heard of them or had a friend back in the day selling them. But this actually is why about 40 years ago now, Lincoln created a hybrid solution. Hybrid, just a fancy word of saying it's not use it or lose it. You don't pay in all this money to Lincoln Financial and not use it for long-term care, and they keep it. If you pay in premiums, you use it for care, you use it for long-term care. Lincoln, you're gonna win, right? You're gonna take Lincoln to the bank, you're gonna use that policy and get a lot of money out of the policy. But if you do not and you pass away before needing long-term care, Lincoln's not keeping your money. Your death benefit will go tax-free to your beneficiaries. So kids, grandkids, whoever that may be. But it was to get away, they created this to get away from the traditional use it or lose it long-term care. They wanted to make sure that, hey, if you don't use it for long-term care, we're not keeping your money and we're going to give it back, not to you, but to your beneficiaries if you pass away before needing it for care. Lots of different options here. I know we talked about five. Every one of us, I'm sure, is common or is knows probably too much about that middle bucket, taking care of family members, whether you've gone to see some before or done it yourself. Just know that that's what we're here for. And then that hybrid long-term care solution is really what we're going to be talking about today with what Lincoln created. So taking a look at the impact of a long-term care event. I mean, we can see here, again, just what I talked about before. Over 37 million Americans have provided unpaid elder care. That comes into taking care of a mom or dad, what my parents did. 59% of these elder caregivers are women. So if you think, hey, my wife is going to take care of me if something happens, this can lead to time lost from a career, parenting their own children, leading a healthy lifestyle, which is why, if you've seen before, and I know it's common, if a spouse takes care of one another, sometimes it can deteriorate their body as well, because helping and providing care to someone is not an easy task. But you can see on the right-hand side that 50% of financial advisors surveyed choose long-term care as the number one risk to a client savings. So the hard-earned money that you put away, long-term care can impact that significantly with those numbers we talked about before. I know I don't have them up on the screen, but that falls into that $165,000 a year, over $430,000 over the span of 4 years. Sadly, it can rapidly decrease portfolios that you all worked very hard with your team to save. Awesome. So one thing that can happen when we don't plan for long-term care is, goodness, my apologies. We can see here, so we have some impactful stats on the left-hand side, but one thing that can happen when we don't plan for long-term care is a lot of stress. We all know what happens when we have to provide unplanned care for a mom, dad, friend, family member. And 92% of Americans think that having a long-term care plan in place would alleviate these worries and stress later on. 97 believe a long-term care plan would make things easier on their adult children. But you can see on the right-hand side here that planning helps protect your hard-earned savings. So the money that you guys have spent time putting away, saving, and planning for the future, maybe to pass down to your kids or to live a long, healthy lifestyle in retirement where you get a vacation every year, redo your house, whatever that may be. That money you put away with Anthony and Amy and your team Having a long-term care plan in place can help protect this money. It gives you control to make decisions later on. So you can be proactive and not reactive instead of making decisions flying by the seat of your pants because they have to be made. We can make these before that time comes. It also gives your family resources to help manage care. Lincoln has programs in place that do truly help family members figure out how they're going to take care of mom and dad. And we do actually have a team that will sit down with you and your family members and explain how much care costs in your area. Not just that number that I showed on the screen earlier, that's nationwide. They'll sit down, and if you live in the metropolitan area of Minneapolis, they will sit down and tell us how much care is exactly going to cost here for different facilities around where you live, if you would like to stay close to home when you need care. They'll also help your family figure out, hey, here are the facilities within a 10-minute driving distance of you. And here are our options. Here's how much it's going to cost every month so we can make those decisions. And again, be proactive instead of reacting and making them, when everybody is stressed out, but when your life is completely flipped upside down. It also allows us part of that, just being more confident about the future and knowing that if something does happen, you are taken care of. Awesome. So again, now I'm just going to talk about a little bit of the reason why we plan and why we do it now. We all know that a lifespan is how long we live, right? So the year we were born until the year we pass away, as much as we don't like thinking about that, but we know it's going to happen someday versus our health span. That is when we are healthy, when we can go out and do things and enjoy life and not be in a hospital, in and out of a hospital or needing care. And you can see here, it's quite a bit shorter than our lifespan. And I'm sure you all know folks who have been in a nursing home or been in a memory unit for multiple years. Unfortunately, not taking advantage of this now when we are healthy and able to do this can impact us later on where we pay more in taxes for long-term care. We aren't health or we're older, so our premiums are more expensive. Many things come into this, but I always just say taking advantage of your health span now is one thing that can benefit us later on when it comes to care planning. And again, I know these are national averages, and I said before, we can get into the nitty-gritty with a city you live in, a state you live in. I'm not sure if all of you live in Minnesota here, but I can pull up these numbers for any state in the United States, whether you live in Naples, Florida, or Alaska. I can show you how much the average cost of care is in that city. Unfortunately, some will be more expensive. Minnesota, we're the fourth leading state in long-term care expenses. North and South Dakota are also pretty expensive. Those are the three states I cover. But places like Florida, Texas, Arizona, places people go to retire can be fairly expensive as well. These are just like the things I like to talk about, although they give us some broad numbers here. We can really dial into the nitty-gritty with you, Amy, and Anthony and your team. Awesome. And we chatted a little bit about this before. It was just some of those detours. We talked about the cash savings, how it's not going to keep up with inflation or how it could potentially not keep up with inflation. Investment portfolios, we can't plan the market. I always say we don't know what it's going to do 15 years from now or 20 years from now. And if we did, A, I probably wouldn't have a job, but B, I'd be making a lot more money, right? If I did have a job. So health insurance, it's not going to cover those long-term care expenses, and Medicare and Medicaid do limit us in making choices. Those choices will be made for you based on facilities that are available. These are all things that can impact that long-term care plan. But it's never too early about being prepared. Again, what I talked about earlier is our health span is a lot shorter than our lifespan. And one thing I always say is we can wake up any given day and be uninsurable from an insurance company standpoint. You go in for a colonoscopy or you go in for an annual exam and something pops up, all of a sudden we can't get insurance or our rates are extremely expensive. So I always say the best time to think about it, although there's not an age range I throw out, or although there is an age range I fill out or throw out. I normally say, hey, we love looking 50 to age 65. That's the prime time to look. That isn't taking into account the fact that you could go into the doctor at 55 and something comes up and we're uninsurable. So I just say it's never too early to go through these items. And I did send this to Erin as well. She was just going to pop it in the chat for us, but I don't expect you to be able to read this. I know how small this is. But one thing I always say is whether or not we're taking a look at a policy or just having a long-term care conversation, which again is my job. I always say my job is to start that long-term care conversation earlier. What she's sending out is just a flyer or a survey, if you want to call it that, that goes through how you would like to receive care. It asks, would you like to receive care in your home or in a residential facility? If you elected facility, how nice of a facility would you like? Would you like a budget facility or would you like a luxury 5-star facility where you get amazing dessert every single night? If you elected in home care, is it non-negotiable or is this somewhat negotiable or just somewhat important to you? You're okay if you can't stay home. And then one thing I do like on here as well is it does ask you, who would you like to help manage your care needs? And then is this person emotionally, financially prepared to take you on or to take that role on as a caregiver? I love this because I just think it's extremely important questions that I'm going to be honest, sometimes we just don't think about until it's too late and those decisions have to be made. I always say if you take a look at that sheet for 2 minutes after this phone call is over, and I know it's not a hard copy, but I always make the joke if you throw it in a recycling bin, it's still a win for me because you having that conversation with a spouse or a family member are things that we can talk about now before you ever need them for care. And I hope that is a really, really long time from now and we don't have to worry about that. But again, part of my job is getting that conversation going earlier. So when it does happen, we don't have to be reactive. We can have a plan set in place. Awesome. So one thing you can see the stats on the right-hand side of the screen. I'll just read off that top one that 72% of Americans want to buy it earlier in life. That way they can pay smaller premiums over a longer period of time. It's no shock to any of you, but as we age, our premiums get more and more expensive. Just as I mentioned before, sometimes premiums go up with age. They also go up with health problems. So if we have something come up, you can be rated higher and it will cost more. But taking advantage of it now can help keep premiums as low as we can. That way we don't pay the price for waiting too long and getting a policy after it might be already be too late. And then as I mentioned before, just going over this one last time, and we have a couple more slides here before we open it up for questions. But what we're doing on this hybrid side of the house that I work here with Lincoln on is that if you purchase a policy, everyone is personalized to meet your needs. So we tweak these any which way we need based off how much care is going to cost in your county or how much care is going to cost in your state. We can really get down to the nitty gritty. But when we buy that policy or when we show that policy, I like to think of it as a little bit of life insurance. So we have a death benefit there with a whole lot of long-term care scooped on the top of it. So it's really keeping that death benefit as low as possible so we can have a lot of long-term care on top of it. If we need it for care, we start pulling money out of that a lot of long-term care bucket and we have guaranteed amounts shown. If we don't need it for care, we pass away. That death benefit goes to our beneficiaries, kids, grandkids, whoever that may be, tax-free. That's really that hybrid long-term care side of the house that we had spoken about before. It's making sure that you have options and you're not giving money to the insurance company and getting nothing in return. Now, although it's not going to make you whole at the end of the day if you were to pass away, it is going to make your beneficiaries whole with that death benefit. But if we use it for care, we really see a lot of leverage on the long-term care side of the house. So truly for those people who were worried about that long-term care side of the house, the death benefit is just a nice addition if we don't use it. So here's the case study we're going to take a look at here, and we're wrapping up our last few slides. So feel free to throw some questions in that chat if you have any. But taking a look at Kelly, she's age 65. She's in great health. She wants to be in control of her life. And she's worried about if she gets an illness, if it's going to deplete her savings she worked hard for. What we're taking a look at is a $100,000 Lincoln Money Guard policy with a 6-year long-term care benefit period. She qualifies for our Money Guard Advantage, Fixed Advantage, with a couples discount. You can see there's a note at the bottom. You just get a couples discount for being married. So it's either couples discount or single, but it is discounted if you are married. Awesome. So I have a question here from Anthony. What are the options for me if I'm already retired and have a health condition where I likely won't qualify for long-term care? Can you explain the difference between regular insurance and hybrid options and how they apply? Absolutely. So I'm going to roll through on the next slide really quick just so we can see those numbers, and then I will circle back around to this. So taking a look at those numbers that I just mentioned, and I apologize, I should have waited for the end to read that question. We showed that MoneyGuard Fixed Advantage for Kelly. She's putting in $10,000 premiums with a maximum monthly at age 85. She can pull out of just shy of $7,000. So $6,917 a month to use for care, and she can pull out an annual amount of $83,000. And she has a total bucket of $536,000 to use. As I mentioned before, you can see that 536,000 and 100,000 right next to each other. That's that leverage I talked about where it's a little bit of death benefit. So in this situation, $100,000 of death benefit with a whole lot of long-term care of $536,000 on there. Now, something I didn't mention before is we do have a return of premium option as well. If Kelly, in this situation who we're picking on, wakes up 10 years from now and says, hey, I don't know why I bought this. I'm never going to need care. I want my money back. She can absolutely do that. And she's given 70% of her premium back. Now, we take a hit on it, right? She put in 100,000, she's only getting 70 back, but it gives you the flexibility and option to walk away from it later on if you want to. We call this the three bucket story. You win, you use Lincoln and take them to the bank. You use a lot of their money, 536,000 to be exact for long-term care. You pass away, they win, your beneficiaries, they're getting $100,000 tax-free. And I should have mentioned before that 536,000 is coming out tax-free as well. Beneficiaries get $100,000 tax-free, or you win, you wake up, you decide to walk away from the policy, you do still get money back, although it's less than what you put in. Awesome. And so guaranteed benefits, as I mentioned before, we do have flexible funding options. You don't have to pay it all in 1 year or in 10 years. We can do many years in between there. If you need benefit, so if you go on claim and you need to pull out money every single month, we do have a 0-day elimination period. Elimination period, it's a fancy way of saying a waiting period before you can take money out of the policy. It's very common for carriers to have a 90-day elimination period. This is kind of where Medicare steps in. But one thing that's nice about Lincoln is that we do have a 0-day elimination period. When you go on claim, so when we can't do 2 of 6 activities of daily living, and our life is flipped upside down, right? No one wants to go on care. When our life is flipped upside down, we can't do 2 of 6 ADLs, or we have severe cognitive impairment, we have a 0-day elimination period. We can go on claim and get a check from Lincoln that same week. We have a couples discount, like I mentioned. If you are married, we do get a discount for you being together. We have guaranteed inflation protection, and we do also have a benefit transfer rider. All that means is that if you were to pass away and your spouse or your kid has a policy, they can tack on your death benefit onto their policy free of charge without additional underwriting. That rider is free. And also we can get into the nitty gritty if you have any questions later on with that as well. But we do just like to show that we do have guaranteed benefits for long-term care. There's a lot that goes into these policies. I know it's not just easy peasy and we sit here and talk about it on a webinar and you walk away with all of this information about care. I know that as we're rolling through this, honestly, you're probably going to forget most of what I'm saying, but just know that we're here to help with all of that. And I'm going to throw those disclosures up on the screen. So coming back to Anthony's question from earlier, and Randy, thank you for the question as well. You guys can keep throwing those in there. That is perfect. So what are the options for me if you're already retired and have a health condition where you likely won't qualify? Unfortunately, with our hybrid solution, so that Lincoln solution we talked about, if you cannot qualify for that, we do still have that self-funding option, right? Medicare will come in and take care of a few days, possibly Medicaid if you have a spend down, all of that. But that is, I always say everybody's going to self-fund to some extent with long-term care. Unless we're putting in significant amounts of premium into a policy, it's never going to cover 100% of your care, and it's not meant to. I always say a Lincoln policy is meant to come over and cover this part and be the part that we turn on first. Other retirement assets are meant to come in over top of it. Unfortunately, we can shop other carriers and see if you are insurable with someone else, but that if we won't qualify, we still have that self-funding option, which is a great option at the end of the day. And then can you explain the difference between regular insurance and how hybrid options and how they apply? Absolutely. So many of you on here may be familiar with life insurance or life insurance with a long-term care rider. That's actually the world I come from. I spent the last 7 years in the life insurance world, and then I moved over to Lincoln a couple years ago now. But I like to think of life insurance with a rider as a lot of life insurance, a little bit of long-term care. And how I think about MoneyGuard is a lot of long-term care and a little bit of life insurance. So I really truly just flip my hands that I use. That hybrid option just gives us a lot of long-term care here and a little bit of death benefit. The death benefit's just there to keep everything tax-free. And Anthony, let me know if I answered that question correctly. When I think of it, I like to think of if you are more worried about passing down a death benefit to your beneficiaries than using it for long-term care, life insurance with the rider is an awesome solution for that. If you're worried about long-term care, not necessarily about a death benefit, Lincoln Money Guard might be a great solution for that as well that we can take a look at. Awesome. And then back to the health condition question here. I'm taking a look in the chat. What if I had a health incident such as cancer, but I've been cancer-free for 10 years? Would that prevent me from qualifying? Actually, we do have a pre-screen tool, looks actually just like this flyer I sent out, or we have from before, has a lot of information on cancer waiting periods. Having cancer 10, 15 years ago does not automatically rule you out for MoneyGuard. We can go in, get specific with the type of cancer, the stage and the grade, and make sure that before you put in an application and before we take a look at this, that you would qualify. So no, it doesn't necessarily rule you out. Sometimes numerous years in between a cancer diagnosis and remission and applying is actually better for us. So, and same with other health questions as well. I have a whole sheet that I can make sure our team sends out to you all that you can take a look at and go through and see, oh, if I have a handicap parking permit, unfortunately, we can't insure you. You can see all those automatic declines on the front, cancer history, height and weight charts, and other conditions on the back end that we can take a look at. Randy, I'm going to answer your question. What would the monthly premium be? Unfortunately, I don't have one right off the bat for you, as we would want to tailor this to the area you live in, age, male, female, all of that. So we can get into the nitty-gritty with that. I'll work with Anthony and Amy to make sure we can get you some numbers. And then when families end up facing long-term care expensive, which cost tends to surprise them the most? I will be honest, one that surprised me the most and some of the folks I work with are the home health care costs. So a home health aide versus a registered nurse. Unfortunately, there are two different price points there. Paying a registered nurse to come into your house, I believe the average in Minnesota right now is over $160 an hour, whereas bringing a home health aide in can cost between $30 and $40 an hour. Two varying different costs, but keeping someone home for long-term care can be very, very expensive. The average nursing home in Minnesota right now costs just over $14,000 as well, which was a surprising figure for me, just because we know it's expensive and it's something, we know nursing homes are expensive, but sometimes hearing the actual figure or what it costs in our county is terrifying to say the least, but right about $14,000, $15,000, we can get into the nitty-gritty with counties as well. What if I have standard life insurance, but I would like to get more long-term care coverage? Are there any conversion options? It does depend on the carrier. I will be honest, based on my previous history in the life insurance world, they don't necessarily allow you to convert and add a long-term care rider, as it does require insurability. They're going to make you do an underwriting health screening that we talked about before. But I'm not saying they don't, just depends truly on the carrier. Maybe one of those things where if you do have standard life insurance right now, we can just get another policy to tack on top of that, whether it be with the carrier that you have, Lincoln, or any sort of carrier out there. Lots of options to take a look at to make sure, you're adding a long-term care piece on top of that death benefit. Any other questions out there? I know we flew through quite a bit of information and lots of numbers. And although I know sometimes seeing them, they're impactful when we look at them, but they're also a little scary and make us shy away from the conversation. I know Anthony mentioned that before, but I am here to help with any questions, and I'm here to help get into the nitty-gritty with the county you live in, the state you live in. But also, you have an amazing team who does this all day, every day, who can send you this sheet that I mentioned before that's in the chat. You can go through that with your spouse, your kids, whoever that may be. But you also have a great team behind you who's going to help you set up a plan and make sure that this is taken care of for you. There isn't one right way to do it. Although I work for Lincoln, that doesn't mean that Lincoln is the best product and the right product for every single person on this call. It does depend on you individually. We want to make sure there's a plan of care in place for you, whether it's with us or not.
Well, I
Um,
was going to jump in, not to
yeah,
keep the discussion going in terms of, what you've said here, Kaylee, is super important. I think it's when you see all those numbers, you've already alluded to it, it can be so overwhelming to start thinking about it. And, I tell people all the time, the people we work with or people we talk to, that the most important thing is to have a plan. It's not as, I shouldn't say it's not as important. It's important to build your plan so that it works for you. But what works for one person may not work for another person. And there's all sorts of, to like get back to Randy's question. I mean, when you're asking a premium question like that, Randy, it really comes down to, well, do you want the highest end coverage? Do you want a medium tier? Do you want a lower tier? Just like any other insurance, you really can kind of customize to an extent. Where Kaylee, you come in with a ton of expertise that you've shared with us today is on not just the straight up insurance policy option, which I think is what if I'm thinking of long-term care insurance, I'm thinking of, well, I pay my premiums, and then if I get sick or need the help, they pay me. That's what insurance is. But where Kaylee really specializes is on the options for maybe I don't want to pay that monthly premium. Maybe I want to stick in maybe a little more upfront or do a bigger set, use an asset that I already have. And this is where somebody like we can come in and help you navigate that. Use an asset you already have to bonus up. Oh, that's my word, but bonus up your long-term care coverage. And that world, as you've seen, can get complicated here very quickly. So that's where we bring somebody like Kaylee in. And she said it exactly right. This conversation today is about the concept. Whether it's Lincoln or any company that you work with, it's about making sure that there's one for you. You get the right thing for you. So I've summarized some of the things you've said, Kaylee, but this has been super helpful.
yeah, and those are all the important ones I say. It's not a one size fits all as much as I wish it was, because it'd probably make everybody's lives easier. I'm truly here to help, and same with Anthony and Amy and your guys' team as well. You're in good hands, and I'm so thankful I got to hop on today and take up your guys' lunch hour. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if anybody has any more questions, feel free to email us. And I don't know if there's a slide with your contact info on there, Kaylee.
Sadly, there's not. They do have to
Okay.
go through you, but feel
They
free to
have to
get
go
them
through
on
us.
over to
Got
me
it.
and we can help.
So everyone on this call should have obviously our contact information. That's how you got invited. So if you have further questions for us or Kaylee or both, shoot us an email, any one of us, me, Margie, Amy, Aaron, the main email, and we'll either pass along your question to Kaylee or bring her in and kind of do a joint answer, whatever the question might be. But this is a resource for you. So even if it's, I tell you all, even if it's, this is a dumb, weird little question, can I please just ask it? Absolutely. Please don't hesitate. So, with that, unless there's anything else on your end, Kaylee, I thank you for being here.
No, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great day.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Take care.